the bank that ruled without a flag. It never held elections, raised an army, or issued a national flag. Yet its decisions shaped borders, currencies, and governments. Power moved through it quietly, without ever appearing to belong to it. To understand how a bank could rule without territory, we have to step outside the idea of nations and into the architecture of trust. In Europe, authority has often flowed not from force, but from credibility. Long before treaties unified the continent, finance connected it. And within that network, certain institutions gained influence not by command, but by necessity. That dynamic still defines power today. The story begins in a Europe fractured by borders, but bound by trade. Merchants needed settlement. Governments needed credit. Wars needed funding. One institution learned how to provide all three without claiming sovereignty. It positioned itself not as a ruler, but as an indispensable intermediary. Whoever controlled settlement controlled continuity. At first, its role appeared technical, clearing obligations, extending short-term credit, managing flows between rival states. But over time, dependence grew. When confidence tightened anywhere in Europe, liquidity passed through this bank's balance sheet. When currencies wavered, its acceptance stabilized them. Influence accumulated invisibly. What made the bank extraordinary was restraint. It did not dictate policy. It shaped options. Governments discovered that certain decisions became easier when aligned with its preferences and harder when they were not. No threats were issued. No conditions announced publicly. The pressure was structural. Early observers struggled to name this power. It was not colonial, not imperial, not democratic. It operated through access rather than authority. If you were connected, markets trusted you. If you were not, costs rose quietly. The bank never ruled territory. It ruled confidence. As Europe modernized, the institution adapted, borders shifted, systems evolved. Yet the model endured. Influence without visibility, control without proclamation, a center that claimed neutrality while shaping outcomes. By the time regulators and politicians recognized what it formed, the structure was already embedded. Power had learned to hide inside function, and removing it would mean dismantling the system it held together. The bank that ruled without a flag did not conquer Europe. It became too essential to ignore, and that is how quiet power always works. Its influence expanded not through ambition, but through repetition. Each crisis reinforced its role. Each disruption passed through its systems. Governments turned to it not because they trusted it more, but because alternatives did not exist at scale. Convenience hardened into reliance. Inside ministries and treasuries, this dependence reshaped decision-making. Policies were drafted with an awareness of how they would be received inside this institution's corridors. Financing plans aligned subtly with its expectations. No instruction was ever issued. Alignment emerged naturally. As resistance proved costly, the bank perfected a language of neutrality. It did not advocate publicly. It published data, models, and assessments that appeared technical and apolitical. Yet those outputs framed what was considered prudent, sustainable, or risky. Once framed, debate narrowed. Choices outside that frame became expensive. Markets amplified the effect. Investors watched the bank's signals closely, interpreting silence or engagement as guidance. Access to its operations lowered funding costs. Distance increased them. Confidence clustered around its balance sheet. Even as sovereignty remained elsewhere, what made this power durable was its invisibility. There was no moment to resist, no decree to overturn. The bank did not replace governments. It shaped the environment in which governments operated. Authority remained national. Constraint became systemic. Over time, criticism surfaced. Was this institution too central, too insulated, too powerful without mandate? Yet, dismantling it meant risking fragmentation. Europe faced a familiar dilemma. The structures that stabilized systems also entrench influence. The bank survived scrutiny by staying indispensable. Each reform strengthened transparency without reducing centrality. Each crisis deepened reliance while reaffirming neutrality. Power adjusted rather than retreated. By the time Europe fully understood the reach of this institution, It had already become part of the infrastructure. Questioning it felt like questioning circulation itself. And that is how authority without borders endures, not by demanding obedience, but by making alternatives impractical. The tensions surfaced when Europe began asking who ultimately bore responsibility. The bank did not legislate, yet its framework shaped law. It did not govern, yet its assessments influenced elections indirectly through markets. Accountability blurred as influence deepened. Inside policy debates, the paradox became harder to ignore. National leaders remained answerable to voters, but their room to maneuver narrowed within boundaries this institution helped define. Fiscal choices were filtered through credibility metrics. Monetary paths were constrained by market reactions routed through its systems. Power operated one step, removed from visibility. Attempts to rebalance the relationship emerged cautiously. Oversight expanded. Mandates were clarified. Transparency increased. Yet each adjustment reinforced the same conclusion. The bank's role was no longer optional. Removing its influence would fracture trust across borders that lacked a shared fiscal authority. Crises exposed the dilemma most clearly. When confidence evaporated, governments waited not for elections or treaties, but for signals from this institution. Its action stabilized markets faster than political consensus ever could. The speed advantage translated into authority, even when authority was never claimed. Critics argued this was undemocratic. Defenders called it necessary. Both were right. The bank did not seize power. It inherited it from a system that demanded coordination without surrendering sovereignty. In that gap, functional authority flourished. Over time, the institution learned restraint. It avoided public confrontation. It framed decisions as technical necessity rather than choice. Power, when disguised as function, attracts less resistance. And resistance, when fragmented, rarely succeeds. The result was a center that could not command, but could not be ignored. A presence felt most strongly when absent. When its operations paused, markets noticed immediately. When engaged, pressure eased. Europe had created something unprecedented, a source of influence without a flag, without an electorate, and without a clear rival. Not by design, but by evolution. The question was no longer how the bank gained power. It was whether Europe could ever operate without it. The answer emerged slowly, not through reform, but through acceptance. Europe did not dismantle the bank's influence. It learned to live with it. Oversight became dialogue. Accountability became layered. Power was acknowledged without being fully resolved. The institution adapted in return. It increased transparency where possible. It formalized processes that had once been informal. It accepted scrutiny without surrendering centrality. The balance remained imperfect, but it held. What Europe ultimately recognized was that power had shifted form. Authority no longer required borders. It required trust at scale. And trust, once centralized, creates gravity that shapes everything around it. The bank that ruled without a flag did not seek sovereignty. It became infrastructure. And infrastructure, once embedded, governs behavior quietly and continuously. Removing it would require redesigning the entire system it supports. The lesson extended beyond finance. Modern power often hides inside systems designed for efficiency. It accumulates where coordination is scarce and necessity is high. By the time it is visible, it is already essential. Europe did not lose control to this institution. It shared control without naming it. The arrangement remains uneasy, but functional. Influence without mandate. Authority without territory. And as long as Europe relies on integration without full political union, such power will persist, not because it is imposed, but because it fills a vacuum no one else can. Sometimes the strongest forces are the ones that never ask to rule, subscribe to join the journey. The